wizard is going away for like half a week and he's just saying, here, carry this egg with you at all times. Sorry for any inconvenience. Hello humans, my name is Dale Kingsmill, and if you don't already know, I quite regularly make videos on the Geek and Sundry Vlogs channel about myths. And so for a nice little twist on that, I thought I'd do some more storytelling over here on my personal channel. Only that twist is that instead of talking about myths, I'm going to be telling fairy tales. Or, as I like to call them, Faerie Daels. I'm pretty hilarious, I know. It's okay, I'll pause for your laughter. And because we are so close now to Halloween, I thought it would be very, very appropriate to tell a tale of blood and terror. Specifically, the tale of Bluebeard. Or actually, technically, it's a variation on the Bluebeard story called Fitcher's Bird. You better be ready, because it is gonna get gory. Once upon a time, there was an old wizard who was a pretty bad dude. He would often take the form of a beggar, carrying a basket on his back as if he was going to collect charitable donations, and he would use this to trick and to capture young women. The girls would disappear without a trace and nobody knew where they'd gone or what had happened or who had taken them. And one day, the wizard beggar bad guy came to the door of a house in which 3 sisters lived. The eldest sister answered the door, and when the wizard begged for some food, she reached out to give him some bread. But the wizard snatched out his hand and grabbed her wrist, and his magic forced her to climb into his basket. He ran back to his home deep, deep within the woods. He told the sister that the two of them would soon be married and that they'd be very happy together, but first he had to run an errand outside of the forest, and it was going to take a few days. The creepy old dude handed over a ring of keys that would open every door in the house and explained that the sister would have free reign of any of these rooms, except she wasn't allowed to go through the door that was unlocked by the smallest key. Probably opened up the West Wing. What's in the West Wing? It's forbidden! Then an extra weird thing happened. The wizard handed the sister an egg. He told the sister to carry the egg with her at all times because if she were to ever drop it, a terrible thing would happen. As soon as he was gone, the sister made her move to escape the house. But the keys only opened the rooms in the house, not the front door, silly. Using every key on the ring, the sister opened every door in the house, hoping to find a window that she could climb out of somewhere. But she found nothing but boring piles of gold and a single window that was much, much too high up in the house for her to climb out safely. Eventually, she ran out of keys, except for the little one that she had been told explicitly not to use. She went for it. Stepping forward into the room, she heard a sort of sticky, wet, slippery, splashing sound where her foot had hit the floor. She looked down and saw more blood on the floor of that room than she thought could ever possibly be in one place. Directly ahead of her was a basin filled to the brim with blood and bits of dead bodies and bobbing heads. The sister felt faint and nearly threw up into the basin of blood. And in her very, very understandable panic, she dropped the egg right in amongst the body parts, where it popped up and floated like a dismembered eye. Realizing exactly why the wizard had wanted her to stay out of this room, namely because he is a psycho killer, the sister trembled in fear at what would happen if he were to discover that she had entered the room against his spooty and rightly ignored will. She hesitantly plucked the egg out from between a severed arm and a kidney and rushed to wash it off and hide what she'd done. But the blood would not scrub off from the egg no matter how hard she tried. In the end, she just gave up and sat and waited for the wizard's return and her own death. That's bleak, isn't it? When the wizard came home again, just as she'd thought, the first thing he asked for was the egg. Seeing that the eldest sister had gone into the room, the wizard dragged her by her hair back into the bloody room, chopped off her head, hacked her up into little bits and threw them all into the basin with the rest. The wizard grabbed his beggar coat and headed out to snatch the second sister. The second sister was caught in the same manner, and events unfolded just as they had with the eldest, culminating in her horrible and gruesome murder at the hands of the wizard. By the time the wizard came to collect the youngest, she had become pretty suspicious of this beggar dude who kept turning up just before her sisters went missing, but she was burning to find out what had happened to her siblings, and so, just like the other two had, she went to hand him the bread, and as a result was caught in just the same way as they had been before her. When, after a few days, the wizard gave the same speech about how he had to go on a trip for a few days and needed her to look after his precious egg, the youngest put the egg down on the table as soon as the wizard had left. There was no reason for her to carry it. There was no one else in the house to break the egg, so she could just leave it where it was and it would be fine when he got back. The youngest made a beeline directly for the room with the smallest key, assuming naturally that if that's the place where the wizard doesn't want her to go, then it's probably where she could find answers about what had happened to her sisters. And answers aplenty there were. In front of her as she entered the room, she saw her siblings' faces staring blankly at her from in between chopped up messes of their own limbs. Screaming and weeping at the terrible sight, the youngest immediately fished out the bits of her sisters' bodies and laid them out on the floor, trying to get them into the right order so that they might resemble in some small way the sisters that she remembered. And I don't know, I guess the youngest was a bit magic too or something, because as soon as she got their body bits into the right places, they started to join up again and connect themselves to one another, and eventually the sisters rose up from the floor, living once again to cling to the youngest and cry in gratitude. The sisters talked and schemed and worked out exactly how they were going to make their escape. When the wizard did come home and found that the egg was unmarred by the blood of his previous victims, he rejoiced and exclaimed that the youngest had withstood his test and soon she could be married to him. Wow, gee, what a prize. Lucky girl. The youngest agreed, but first demanded that the wizard take a huge basket full of his gold to her parents' house as some kind of, I don't know, like recompense for having kidnapped all of their children. The wizard begrudgingly agreed, as he thought it would be a nice gesture of faithfulness between him and his new wife. The youngest sister took the big beggar's basket back to the room where she had hidden her sisters, and she told them that the evil wizard would be the one to unwittingly carry them home to safety. The two older sisters climbed into the basket, and the youngest poured heaps of gold on top of them so that they couldn't be seen. She handed the heavy basket to the wizard and told him that he was to go directly to her parents' house, and that she would be watching him from the highest window in the creepy mansion to see if he delayed or stopped to rest, or to check what was in the basket. The wizard did as he was told, and any time that he stopped to try and rest, the second sister in the basket, who was great at impressions and had a special talent for throwing her voice, would call out in the voice of the youngest sister that she could see him from the high window and she knew that he was stopping to rest. Meanwhile, back at the creepy mansion, the youngest had collected a few more dismembered and partially decomposed body parts and propped them up at the window at the top of the building, putting a head on top that had hair a little bit like hers in order to simulate herself gazing out to see if the wizard was completing his task. Then she went and dipped herself in a barrel full of honey that she had found in the pantry, and she cut open one of the feather beds and rolled around in it for a bit. Her plan was, you see, to make herself look like a bird. Yes, that crafty wench. A giant, upright walking, slightly sticky humanoid and with lots of bald patches between the feathers, non-beak having bird. That'll fool him. After the egg test, the wizard had decided that his new bride was clearly trustworthy, and he had this time left the front door unlocked. And the youngest sister walked straight out of that creepy mansion in her birdie disguise. While she was leaving, she actually ran into the wizard returning from his trip with the basket. She quickly climbed up into a tree and made squaw, squaw sounds, and the wizard, still seeing his beautiful betrothed keeping watch at the high window, didn't see any reason to be suspicious of the giant squaw bird. Once the wizard had entered his house, the sister and her entire family, who had just arrived to save her, blocked up the doorway and set the house alight, leaving the wizard to burn to death. So how's that for a horrible, gruesome story? At least it had a happy ending. If you enjoyed this fairy tale, leave me a comment letting me know what other ones you'd like me to do. I would appreciate it if you would hit the like and subscribe buttons. I make videos here every week. Please also remember to share this video on your social media website of choice. Email it to your grandma, and I will see you guys some other time.
Who are you?
Most in the town call me the founder. I can show you a bit of what you could learn.